Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's topic, it's something I've thought about before, but I feel like it wasn't until someone recently pointed it out and really discussed it that it really kind of hit me. And that's the whole aspect of like commonalities between the DC TV shows and the movies, the commonality being like the exact heroes, like how in the Arrowverse situation you have Grant and Gustin as the Flash, but in the DCEU movies you have Ezra Miller as the Flash. There's also multiple Supermans because there's Tyler Hoechlin on Supergirl, but there's also Henry Cavill in the DCEU movies. It's because I guess in my mind, like I've talked about it, I've even referenced the Arrowverse when I've talked about the DCEU movies, but it just still never correlated until someone else pointed out. I was like, right. Like there's moments where I remember it, but a lot of times I just kind of keep it separated. But I guess that's because it kind of makes sense, because it seems like the DCEU, well, for one, I think it's also because in my mind I've always treated it like, I think because once upon a time I probably thought like, it's the multiverse, who cares? Like that's probably how I've always kind of treated it with this whole situation. I think a lot of times I just didn't think about it, but a few times I did, I just treated it as a multiverse thing. But now I'm like, no, because they don't even treat it like a multiverse thing, because it's just kind of like a, yeah, the TV shows are their own thing and the movies are their own thing. Because obviously you have like the more Arrowverse stuff that takes place on the CW. Because obviously you have other shows like Gotham, and you also have like the newest show, Krypton. It's such an interesting thing because it's an issue only DC stuff has. And I say issue but it's not really an issue, but it's just something that someone pointed out because they're like, I guess it's someone who's kind of tangibly connected. Like they know the DCEU movies, they only somewhat know about the particulars of like the TV shows. I don't think they really watched it, this person I'm kind of referencing. They just kind of talked about how it's just interesting because you have the same characters but being played by different people in different like live adaptations, and how confusing that can be in a sense, because it's just like, oh, like I said, the Superman's the Superman and the Flashes, which I mean you also have like the Batman situations because you have Gotham, but at the same time it's like, well, Gotham's a prequel, so it's kind of okay because it leaves room open for like the DCEU Batman. But at the same time it's like eventually it's going to get to that point where it's like, oh yeah, like what about Green Arrow? Like Arrow has been on currently for 6 years, so it's like when eventually they add a Green Arrow to the movie, eventually it's gonna get to that point. It's like, oh, but what about Arrow? It's like, I mean, maybe that's one of the reasons why they haven't really tackled that yet, because Arrow is such a popular show, at least, you know. Maybe it's kind of got a big enough following. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they kind of still did the same thing with The Flash. And The Flash didn't get set up until like 2016 in the DCEU movies with Batman v Superman, but Flash has been around technically since 2013, but technically 2014, because obviously Barry Allen popped up in season 2 of Arrow, but like obviously he didn't become the Flash until season 1 of The Flash, but that was taking place around season 3 of the Arrow, which was like 2014. So it's like I said, going back to what I was bringing up, it's such a unique issue that only the DC stuff has, and like I said, it's not much of an issue because even the Marvel stuff has that. They have the, because Marvel's whole thing is everything's connected. Like even though the TV shows and the movies are disconnected at this point, it's been out there, like TV shows are their own thing, the movies are their own thing, they still occupy the same universe to the point that they can reference one another. But it's that situation of like they still kind of do their own things, but like the DC stuff, it's like, nah, this is kind of its own thing, this is kind of its own thing, which is kind of interesting because like the Arrowverse kind of does the whole multiverse thing, which is going to be interesting when the movies eventually do it. Because it's going to turn into that situation of like, oh yeah, like, you know, because like I think one great example I've kind of used in the past is like when Greg Miller from Kind of Funny has talked about the Flash in the past. He talks about the fact it's because he loves Grant and Gustin as the Flash. It's like that's his go-to for the Flash now. He can't even read the comic books without, you know, because it's like that's not Grant and Gustin as the Flash, so it's not as good in his mind, and it's like hashtag not my Flash. But I just always think that's kind of an interesting thing. But kind of going along with that, it's kind of like this whole, I mean, it kind of fits, it works in the comic book world very interestingly enough because different people get different like the same character, and you get all these different people who've had their take on a character over the years. Using a great example like Superman, over the 80 years he's been a thing. Many different people have told different stories with him and stuff like that. So there's always going to be people doing different things with him, because there's always people who are like, oh, this version of this superhero is great because I love the stories that were told, I love this person's this writer or artist depiction of this character. So it kind of becomes that same thing where it's like, oh yeah, like which one do you like? Do you like Grant Gustin's Flash? Do you like Ezra Miller's Flash? Do you like John Wesley Shipp's Flash, for example? So it's that type of thing where it's just kind of like, I mean, it's like, I mean, you could be in that camp where it's like, well, you can love both. I feel like you shouldn't have to be able to choose, but obviously there's always going to be people who prefer one over the other, which is also interesting because like obviously there's the whole situation, that's something I've talked about before, it's the whole Flash situation where it's like the whole Flashpoint storyline. The TV show's done it, but apparently that's going to be the storyline for the first Flash movie. you know, if they still haven't decided to go down a different route. But like, obviously those are going to be two very different depictions of this particular story, and so it's just kind of interesting to me to kind of think like that. Because it's interesting to me because I feel like that same situation, I'm sure like there have been like, I mean, I definitely know like Superman Return came out around the same time as Smallville was still ongoing, because that was like around 2005, 2006. But to be fair, it's like, well, Smallville is kind of a prequel, so it doesn't matter. Kind of the same thing as like Gotham is the Batman type of situation. So I don't know if that would, and also Smallville kind of ended up being its own thing, its own kind of continuity in many different areas. So my big thing is like, because there's also animated stuff too, but you don't really kind of lump that together. I think it's just because it's live action stuff, and because there are these connected universes. Like I said, the whole Arrowverse situation on the CW, I think because there is a whole connected universes, like I said, like with the whole Marvel situation, I mean, because like with Marvel that doesn't happen. Like, it's kind of what I'm trying to get at too. It's like you've never seen a hero on TV, on the movies, pop up in the TV shows, because they've been very, like I said, very keeping no disconnected. Obviously the biggest like crossover has been Coulson. You know, like I said, the TV shows reference the movies, but the movies don't reference the TV shows. But I think that's an issue we may never see in Marvel, because it's like once you hit TV, it's like we will probably never put you. I mean, who knows? I mean, there's always different people who picked up the mantle, but because there's also that whole conversation I've talked about countless times in the past. Like, if you were to reference the TV shows, you'd have to expect your audience to have to be a fan and watched them and caught up, so they're not completely lost, because the movies is a lot in itself. Like I said, some people probably watching the TV shows would become homework, which once again, I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's not homework for me. It's just I enjoy those, but I can't expect everyone to like things the way I like them. So for example, like we will probably never see like any Netflix heroes definitely in the MCU movies, like a Daredevil or a Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, or an Iron Fist, or anyone from S.H.I.E.L.D. like Quaid. Coulson will probably most likely never go back into the story, especially where his storyline is heading this season. Obviously, it won't spoil anything, but that's also, you know, depending on what they do with his future. So I don't know, it's such an interesting thing, because I mean, and even in those cases, there is a crossover in some shape or form. It would always be that same actor. It's not a different actor playing a different story. So it's like, for example, going with the DC example, it's like if it was like, for whatever reason, Henry Cavill in both the movies and the TV show, that wouldn't be kind of a conversation now, because it's like, well, because also that would, but the problem is, because they do want to keep them separated, that would mean acknowledging things and kind of making it seem like everything is actually connected, when in actuality it isn't, you know. So I mean, but who knows? With the whole Marvel situation, there's plenty of characters that, depending on how well something does as a TV show, it might be a situation of like, well, we'll probably eventually make that into a movie, because it's kind of like, oh, we'll sweep this under the rug. Like I said, it's just an interesting thing. Like I said, it's like it's there in the back of my mind, but at the same time, I don't think about it a lot. So it's a whole situation I never really kind of like put two and two together with, you know. My question to you is, what do you think about it? Like, do you think that's something that they should do? It's kind of ultimately the question, like have two different Flashes or two different superheroes, because eventually, I mean, we're talking about main like Justice League people here too, so it's like eventually you're gonna have that same situation with Martian Manhunter, because obviously he currently exists on Supergirl. Or do you think it's kind of like, well, because they aren't connected, because it isn't kind of like an outright, like this is all taking place in the same universe, then it's okay? Like they are two separate things? Because I'm sure there's gonna be plenty of people who watch the DCEU movies who don't touch the TV show, so it won't matter as much. I mean, obviously the TV shows have the luxury of being able to also tackle characters that no one will know. Characters that you probably only know if you're really, really into comic books, but like the movies will probably never tackle or even possibly reference, you know. So like I said, do you think it's, you know, too much having so many characters? Should they make it so that they never cross characters like that, like keeping Green Arrow on Arrow but never introducing him into the movies until after? Would it be okay after Arrow runs its course, or would that still not be okay? Like, is it just the fact of having the same character running around at the same time that would kind of be more of an issue, or is it just them being so close together? Just let me know all your thoughts about this in the comments down below. I'm very interested to kind of hear other people's opinions about this. Like I said, it's not much of an issue to me, but it's just kind of something or someone bring up, and I just thought was kind of a fascinating kind of topic. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this video. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live light to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.